Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put your mouth. OK.
Here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. Coming up tonight, history has been made. I'm talking about how badly the Tories performed in the by-elections last night. So I'm asking you a few things tonight. Are the Tories toast? Is it time for a general election? Or is this just the usual by-election noise? You tell me. And crime in England and Wales is now down to the lowest levels on record. Yes, good news, our country is safe. Or is that the case, or is it just that more people no longer even bother to log and report crime anymore? Also, I want to talk to you about housing. Is it the state's job to provide us with a home? One of my panel tonight says yes, and the other says no. What says you? Also, in a UK first, Hull, my hometown, will be the first council to give people the right to grow their own food on neglected council land. I'm talking about places like grass verges, etc. What do you think? Is that the future? Would you be up for it or not? We've got it all to come and more. But before we get into that, let's cross to get the latest news headlines.
Good evening, I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Our top stories. The Prime Minister has praised Egypt for its efforts in trying to deliver aid to civilians in Gaza. After meeting the country's president, Rishi Sunak said Palestinians are also victims of Hamas and expressed his condolences for the loss of lives. He also stressed the importance of opening a safe corridor to Gaza.
Something we have prioritised consistently is getting the Rafah crossing opening. It's been a feature of all my conversations, and I'm very pleased that that will now imminently happen. We announced an increase in our funding for humanitarian aid into the region, and when I met with President Sisi earlier today, he and I had a good discussion about how the UK can provide practical assistance on the ground to ensure the sustainability of that aid through the crossing to the people who need it.
Israel military sources have given more information about the estimated 200 hostages taken by Hamas. They say 30 are teenagers and young children, and 20 are over the age of 60. The majority are still alive. Meanwhile, Israeli troops are mobilising along the border of the Gaza Strip ahead of a possible ground invasion. Back here, Sir Keir Starmer says former Tory voters have put their trust and their confidence in the Labour Party. That's after they overturned Conservative majorities to win 2 by-elections. The video we're about to show contains some flash photography. Now, in Tamworth, Sarah Edwards overturned a Conservative majority of more than 19,000. Meanwhile, Alistair Stratham took mid-Bedfordshire with a 20.5% swing. That's the largest Labour by-election win since 1945. He says he's delighted people voted for change.
We've been really humbled by how seriously people have taken this election, this opportunity to do something different, this chance to make sure we finally have an MP in Parliament who's going to be on our side. And I think it's fair to say that after today, no one is going to be taking us for granted here in Bedfordshire ever again.
Conservative Party Chairman Greg Hands is less impressed. He says Labour's wins are not that significant.
Labour hardly improved their vote at all, and in fact went down in mid-Bedfordshire slightly. But I don't think that will have an impact on the general election. Clearly we need to recognise that a large number of our Conservative voters did not come out yesterday in Mid-Bedfordshire and Tamworth, despite having excellent candidates in Festus Akinbusoya and in Andy Cooper. So we need to work harder. We need to make sure that people get the government message that we are delivering against the 5 priorities, making progress.
The Director General of the BBC will be challenged next week over why the corporation refuses to call Hamas terrorists. On Wednesday, Tim Davie will address a meeting of the Tory party's 1922 committee of backbench MPs. Senior sources have told GB News Mr Davie will be expected to answer questions about the BBC's reporting of the Israel-Hamas conflict, including their coverage of a rocket attack on a Gaza hospital. The meeting was originally called last month to address what some Tory MPs see as bias against the Conservative government. More than 1,600 suspected members of County Line's drug gangs have been arrested across England and Wales. The operation seized Class A drugs worth more than £1 million. Around 58 children have been referred to safeguarding services over concerns of possible exploitation. The action also closed 250 phone lines and seized more than 400 weapons. West Mercia Police says a man in his 60s has died after getting caught in fast-flowing floodwater in Shropshire. He's believed to be the 3rd fatality as Storm Babette continues to cause severe weather conditions. This afternoon, a passenger plane came off the runway at Leeds Bradford Airport while landing in windy conditions. However, there were no reported injuries. The Met Office has issued a new 24-hour red weather warning in central and north-east Scotland as further heavy rainfall is expected. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now let's get back to Michelle.
Thanks for that, Ray. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight alongside me, the Conservative Life Peer in the House of Lords, Daniel Moylan, and the writer and trade unionist, Paul Embry. You know the drill. Oh, hello. Sorry. I was just about to forget all about you guys and go straight on and talk to my audience. How rude of me. You can tell it's Friday. I was just about to ask you guys, actually, about the storm. Obviously, that story there in the bulletins. Awful scenes. Have any of you guys been caught up in it? Get in touch and let me know your experiences. You were delayed. You had a traumatic journey today.
I went through hell and high water to get to you, Michelle, and just to make sure that our viewers could see me this evening. I had a date with you. I couldn't pass it up.
What he means is he knows that on a Friday, Dewberry Tavern opens, so he gets a free pint. Nothing is going to stop Paul Embry getting his mitts around that pint.
So cynical. That's
what I think it was. Anyway, it's a pleasure to have you. And, of course, you as well, Daniel. And you know the drill. It is very much about you. gbviews@gbnews.com is how you get hold of me tonight, or you can tweet me at GB News. Lots coming your way. I want to talk crime, I want to talk housing, I want to talk growing your own vegetables. And I also, if I've got time, I want to ask you, are Northerners more friendly than Southerners? There's a reason I'm asking you that, but I absolutely think, yes, they are. What's your thoughts on all of that? But, of course, the big news of the day is the absolute battering that the Tories got at those 2 by-elections last night. Of course, I'm talking about Mid-Bedfordshire. I'll bring up the map, by the way, because people talk about these places and assume that everybody knows where everything is. But, of course, the seat Mid-Bedfordshire, Labour won that for the first time in 90 years. Of course, as well, we had Tamworth as well, again, won by Labour. I'll bring up a little bit of information for you just on those different seats. If I start with Tamworth, let me just see if I can bring up some of the stats around that so you can see what we're talking about here. Yep, there you go. So Tamworth, of course, just to remind you all, this is the seat previously held by Chris Pincher before he resigned, apparently for groping men. It was a very strong pro-Leave area, this one. You can see, interestingly enough, the swing there, the Labour swing, 23.9%. This is the second largest swing recorded by Labour in a by-election since 1945, interestingly enough. Turnout, we're talking 36% there, which I thought was interesting. Also, I found it quite interesting that Britain First are on that list above Lib Dem, for example, as are UKIP. What do you make to that? Lib Dems were pushed down to 7th place. In 2019, it's just worth saying that the Tories got 66% of that vote. Labour got 24% in the general election. You can see that Labour won this by-election last night by 46%. Let's move on, shall we, to mid-Bedfordshire. Of course, you'll be familiar with this one. This is the seat that Nadine Dorries, she, of course, resigned from. A few things to point out to you here. Your turnout, again, very small, 44%. This seat made history. The Labour win here made history because it was the largest numerical Tory majority to be overturned post-war. The Tories had a majority of 24,664. Yeah, I mean, I shall start with you. And just the swing there, by the way, was 20%. And I just want to give context, because not everyone knows what all of these terms mean. But basically, out of every 100 people that previously voted Tory, 20 of them had swung over to Labour in that by-election. So hopefully that gives you all a bit of a flavour as to what's going on. People now are saying a few different things, Daniel. Time for a general election. But in essence, this is it now. The Tories are done. Do you agree with that?
Well, on these figures, that looks like it's the case, to be perfectly frank. And we haven't seen anything from the Prime Minister that says that he has a plan for reversing it. He has his 5 pledges. He isn't delivering on all the 5 pledges. He's given himself a bit more time. He's got a bit more time to deliver on them. But I think people are becoming impatient. And I think they would like to see something being done about the boats. It's all very well seeing him out there in Egypt, and I'm sure he's doing great work for world peace and so on. But and that is important, really is important. But people want to see him delivering on these things. They want a message from him. They want to know what sort of story, what sort of vision he has for Britain in the future. And he had the opportunity to do that in Manchester, and I think most people agreed that he failed to take advantage of that opportunity. And so we're waiting to see what the plan is. He's got the plan, presumably, because he's the leader.
Are you proud to be a Conservative?
I'm always proud to be a Conservative, because the Conservative Party is one of the most important contributors to the stability, democracy, peace and prosperity of this country over the last 200 years. That's a different question from, do I think the Conservatives are doing the right things to win the next general election, which is the one you asked me. And as far as I can see, on those figures, how could you deny that, how could you say that they are? We've got a consistent 20% Labour lead in the polls, day after day, week after week, poll after poll, month after month. And then we see that roughly translated into the result of by-elections, and we say, oh, you mustn't take any notice of that. That's just a blip. It's not a blip. It's a constant trend going on for months.
I want to come back to you on that, because I'm fascinated by the internal workings there, because obviously you're a Tory Life peer, and I'm fascinated as to, do you tell Rishi Sunak these kind of things? Do you collectively...
He rings all the time.
Yeah, but, like, what do you... I mean, I'm really conscious, I just don't want to keep talking to you without bringing Paul in, but I'll probably come back to you on that. Just to recap, by the way, that Tamworth, 36% was the turnout there, so 64% obviously didn't even bother turning out. You know, are the Tories done?
I think they probably are. I mean, I know by-elections are not always great barometers for what happens at a general election, but I think Daniel's right to say that there is clearly a trend going on. And these results last night for the Tories were absolutely atrocious. I mean, you can't really overstate it. They were appalling, and much worse, I imagine, than even the Tories thought were possible. I guess my only caveat, really, I mean, obviously I'm a Labour person, I'm pleased that Labour won. My caveat is I still don't think this really feels like a 1997 moment, by which I mean that in the lead-up to the 97 election, everybody knew that the Tories were loathed, and there was a lot of affection for the Labour Party, right across the classes, right across all sections of society. This time round, I think the Tories are again loathed, despised in some places, and people feel very, very betrayed over what's happened the last few years. But I don't really detect there is that reciprocal love for the Labour Party. I think that if the Labour Party rides to power, which it certainly looks like it probably will do, it will be as a result largely of the implosion of the Tory party and the implosion of the SNP in Scotland, rather than because people are so enthusiastic about a Labour government. Probably something similar, I mentioned this on the show before, something similar maybe to what happened in the Australian election last year, where the Labour Party did win it, but not really with any great enthusiasm among the public, simply because they were seen as being the least bad of all the options. But from a Tory point of view, it's incredibly bad. And actually, I think there's an entire debate to be had about how the Tory party have squandered that huge legacy that they won in the 2019 election. I mean, the political realignment that they benefited from, they've just absolutely squandered it.
I don't think anyone would disagree with that. Stephen, originally from Hull, he says, smart guy. He makes a good point. He says, how can anyone be elected to Parliament when the vast majority of voters never cast a vote? He says, surely another election should be called until at least half the voters have turned out. You'd be there all day, just be literally going around and around and around. Although it's an interesting point about should there be a minimum threshold in terms of...
Can I just say, that's what the Tories have done with strike action, with unions taking strike action, so why shouldn't it apply to Parliament? A whole different debate, but certainly it's a legitimate point, isn't it?
At what point? I mean, do you literally, if there was a 10% turnout, 90% of people couldn't be bothered to get up and turn out, what, you still get into Parliament that way? Should there be a threshold? You tell me. Tom, and I have to say, Tom is not the only one that's made this point, but Tom says, throughout all the conversations of this, I've never seen anyone mention so far the Reform Party voters, and you make a really interesting point. What you're saying is if the Reform voters were Conservatives, they would have blocked both of the Labour victories by a very slim margin. He goes on to say the centre-right and the right are splitting their own votes, by definition, therefore, letting Labour in through the back door. He's making a very good point that actually the left are very good at kind of strategically voting, whereas if you are to the right of politics, there are so many different fragmentations now that you can go, and all you achieve, and we did it in 2019, I ran for election in Hull as the Brexit Party, and what we achieved, the Tories and the Brexit Party split the vote. Labour got in with less people that had voted for them than actually had voted against them. So do you think there's something in that the right need to unite more?
Well, I think there's a big... I think you can say the same is true of the left, of course, because there are two left-wing parties, the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats, both in contention here. What was interesting is there in Tamworth, the Lib Dems were nowhere, but in mid-Beds, they were high up in the poll. They were third in the poll, and they might even have won. And it was thought that they might win during the course of it. So it's complicated on both sides of the spectrum. It's not just something that fragments on the right. But what I would say is the bigger question, the deeper question is, does this portend some sort of realignment of policies in, especially on the right and the centre-right? So we've had the idea today that Nigel Farage, it's a joke idea, Nigel Farage might become the leader of the Conservative Party.
Why is it a joke idea?
Because that is never going to happen. But whether
how do you know that?
Nigel Farage becomes the leader of a party which actually takes over from the Conservative Party is another question altogether, because there are people inside the Conservative Party and in Parliament at the moment who really, I think, would be more comfortable in Keir Starmer's Labour Party, although they would be horrified to be in Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party. So there's a split there as well. So I think there are all sorts of things that might happen after this next election. If there are any Conservatives, I'd say if there are any Conservatives, there will be Conservatives in the House of Commons, but if there are enough Conservatives in the House of Commons to make a fist fit, then there could be very interesting things going on.
And don't forget, of course, in mid-Beds, Nadine Dorres, she wrote an absolutely scathing resignation letter, do you remember? And she really was not happy, and I'm putting it mildly, with Rishi Sunak. And that's quite interesting because then, whatever the rights and wrongs, and I ain't got time to get into that, but you're then dividing again that right-leaning vote, the centre-right-leaning vote, because then someone will go, well, actually, I might have gone Tories, but I've read that, I agree with her about Rishi, whatever, I am going to go Reform. And then you do have that situation that we're seeing here.
I think where there's sufficient common ground between parties in a particular part of the political spectrum, it does make sense for them to work together and to make sure that there isn't a split in the vote. And I think probably the best example of that was actually in the early 1980s when the Labour Party split and you had the SDP formed under David Owen and Shirley Williams and people like that, and a number of Labour MPs defected to the SDP. And of course, what that did is it split the Labour vote down the middle, really, and allowed many years of Thatcherism. I mean, you will always have on the left, you know, fringe parties to the left, far left parties who will sometimes opt into the Labour Party, do a bit of entryism and then disappear again. But when it happens on a major scale like that, as it did with Labour and the SDP, then actually it can keep you out of power for a long time. So I think the Tories do have a real problem. We saw it actually, you touched on it yourself, Michelle, with the Brexit Party. A couple of years ago, where people were so angry at the Tory party over the fact that they weren't getting Brexit done. And obviously the Brexit party emerged out of that. And in the European elections, actually, you know, absolutely stormed it. So that's the lesson, really. I just think that there's a huge number of voters in this country who would consider themselves to the left economically, so they want, you know, a higher minimum wage, they don't like a racing gap between rich and poor, they want public services are properly invested, full employment and that kind of thing. They don't like boardroom excesses and whatever. But at the same time, on a cultural level, they're a little bit to the right. So they don't like the woke agenda. They want police to patrol the streets.
Who caters to those people?
Well, this is the thing. For years, nobody has. I think the Tories' messaging catered to them in 2019, and that's why they made such inroads into the Labour vote and got all of those red wall seats. The problem is they didn't do anything with it, and people feel let down by it.
Yeah, I mean, it is spectacular. We touched on this, how you go from your stonking majority in 2019 to this, but then you do have to be fair.
You don't get rid of your successful Prime Minister halfway through the process, do you?
Well, indeed, and you do have to be fair as well. You've had the global pandemic, you've had the Ukraine war, we're on the cusp now, some would argue, of potential some kind of war within the Middle East as well. So it's not been an easy time for the Tories. But to your point, I think there's an awful lot of you, many of you watch this programme, I know, that actually have never got over actually the fact that Boris Johnson was ousted because he was the guy that converted you to the Tories in the first place. And many would say that undemocratically got rid of him, Lee says. Sorry, we're talking about whether or not we should have a minimum threshold when it comes to turnout in terms of elections going forward. Would you support that? Ian says that ballot papers should have a none of the above box, and if the none of the above box gets the most votes, the election should be held again, but he says there's a catch. Everyone that's previously stood would be unable to stand again. Cool, blimey, Ian would be there having selections, reselections, would be there all day. Parliament won't get anything done. Lee says, I vote every time I can, local, national, but if anyone tried to force me to vote, I would never vote again. I don't care what they tried to do to enforce it, I wouldn't comply. Dennis said, we should copy Australia. It's the law to vote there. Yes, Den, but what would you say to people like Lee and to people like me that would say that you wouldn't be able to force us to turn out? What would you do? How would you get us out of our living rooms and into that polling station? You tell me. I want to talk to you next about crime. Get this right. In England and Wales, crime figures really have fallen. But does that mean that the country is basically safer, less crime? Or does it mean that people have basically given up reporting crime? You tell me.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6 is Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight in My Big Opinion, following the Tories' double by-election loss, a Labour government is coming. Be careful what you wish for. In my Take at 10, with the world on the brink of war, we need a proper leader in the White House. Joe Biden must be impeached on the grounds of ill health. My Mark Meets guest is TV and radio legend Pat Sharp. Plus, Mike Parry, Edwina Curry, tomorrow's papers and my top pundits. We're live from 9.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry till 7, Daniel Moylan and Paul Embry alongside me. Before the break, we were talking about the by-election results, and lots of you have been in touch talking to me about the impact of the Reform Party, which got me thinking in the break. I think what's going to happen at the next election is the votes to the right and the centre-right, whatever, they are going to be split by the likes of Reform and Tory. Do you think the Tories would or should get into some kind of pre-electoral pact with Reform and say, look, you field candidates over there and we won't bother, and vice versa?
No, I don't think they will, and I don't think they should.
Why not?
I don't think they will, because I can't see that no party that says, you know, there's somebody else out there. I'm not that. I don't want to offer myself for election in some places, because really I'd rather somebody else did it. You're showing no confidence in yourself. You have to go into an election saying, I'm going to win this election. You have to say that to people, even if you know it's nonsense. You can't go in half-heartedly. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I don't see that it would make any great difference anyway. It is true that in these 2 by-elections, as somebody pointed out, the Reform Party did make the difference.
Yeah.
And the Conservatives might have won.
Yeah.
But I think it would be very difficult to track down a few seats where they could do that.
But it happened in 2019 with the Brexit Party. I just gave you my seat as the example.
I know. And then the third thing is, I don't think the electors are like that. You can't say, Conservative Party can't say, Labour Party can't say to their voters, oh, we know you're our vote. We've sold your vote, by the way, to Reform. Would you mind queuing up and voting for Reform? Because we've done a deal.
But you're assuming
and they might
ownership.
say, wait on, we'll vote for who we want to vote for.
You're assuming ownership of a voter. So you're saying, I can't say to my voters, but anyone's voters are individual people who lend a vote
but they're
to a
the
party.
people who have to go out and vote for the party that you've done the deal with. And how can you promise they will do that? Because they are independent.
Do you know what? I'm going to throw it open to you guys to have the final word on that. I could talk about that all night. I find it absolutely fascinating. Anyway, I do want to talk to you about crime, because the ONS statistics now show that crime in England and Wales is down by 10% in the year up to June 2023. Get this, though. Violent crime is apparently down 28%. I know I should sit here, because I scrabble around trying to find positive news stories all the time, so I'm sure that I should be sitting here going, this is absolutely amazing. But there's a part of me that thinks, don't wash with me. I don't actually think all this crime is down by this much. I think it's people now don't even bother reporting stuff. Am I wrong?
No, I think your healthy scepticism is entirely justified, and the truth is actually that the police do have a bit of form, and the Home Office does have a bit of form for misleading people with crime figures. In fact, some police witnesses went in front of a select committee in Parliament around 10 years ago and admitted that crime figures had been manipulated in such a way to give the impression that there were fewer crimes being committed than there are. And I think the way that crimes are often kind of recategorised as well probably has an impact on that. But unquestionably, in my view, the kind of reluctance of people to now report crime has to be a factor. You know, what we're not being told within these figures is how many crimes are occurring across the country. We're being told how many are being reported. We're not being told how many are occurring.
But how would they know how many is occurring if they're not being reported?
Well, exactly. But you know, in that regard, I suspect we probably can't go by anything other than anecdotal evidence. But certainly, in conversations I have with people, I think there is a general feeling out there now that even if you were to report something to the police, especially if it was what the police see as a bit of a low-level crime, then the chances of them investigating it properly, the chances of anyone being charged and later convicted, are almost non-existent, and that then leads into the much wider debate about, you know, the police are clearly not fulfilling their role. I respect individual police officers, but as I've said for some time now, if the police were a commercial organisation, then trading standards would be onto them because they are just not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's criminal damage, actually, that decreased by 28%. But again, I just repeat myself, I think it's just because people think, what is the actual point? And I don't know, say like
you both got this wrong.
Oh, here we go. Me and Paul have got it wrong. Daniel's got it right. We're off firm. We'll go to the
You haven't read the article you're commenting on.
What? I've read loads of them.
Shocking allegation.
These figures have nothing to do
Kick him out.
with crimes reported to the police or with police records.
What is it then?
Okay, these figures are based on a long-running survey of the public.
Right.
Where you go out, and we do this for the labour market as well, because the reason is it's very difficult to measure who's employed, who's unemployed, what the percentages are. So we use surveys for doing that. And the statisticians are very aware that it's very difficult to measure what's actually happening to crime just by looking at police figures. So one of the things they do is they go out and they do a survey of the public every year in which they ask them questions which allow them to build up figures over a longer period so you can see what's trending. That's why it's not actually telling you what the number of crimes are. It's telling you what's up, what's down compared to previous years. Now, like all surveys and all statistics, it comes with some health warnings about how reliable it is, and it does include some additional health warnings here because post-pandemic there were some figures that were not entirely reliable. But they're upfront about that and they say it. But what this is saying is that if you go out and talk to the public about their experience of crime, some crimes are up, some crimes are down, and overall, it's probably it is lower than it has been, and it's been trending a bit lower over the last couple of years, which is good news.
But I've got to pick you up on that because
I'm about to pick him up on it as well. There's a queue to correct the corrector. Who wants to go first? Because I'm about to correct
the fact checker.
Right, just to be clear, everybody, and I shall read. This article, it says I've not read, I shall read it. You can be the judge. Crime in England and Wales has fallen to its lowest level on record. Data from the Office for National Statistics shows. Full stop. Hang on. Full stop.
It also says the
separate crime survey for England and Wales, which polls members of the public, also suggests things like a 20% drop. So we are both correct.
And it does say, and it also says...
Get the camera on him, because now he's frantically... Daniel Moyne is now frantically reading the letter
also
that he says I didn't read.
It also says, according to the Office for National Statistics, the number of recorded homicides fell to 602. Now, that can't be something that you just do from a survey.
Recorded homicides are extremely... Well, there are low frequency.
Come on, concede the point, Daniel. Come on.
Crimes,
you're wrong. You were just
like
wrong.
Homicide,
you know you was.
which you don't survey.
Come on.
Because the police don't get those numbers wrong.
I'll take that.
Homicides you can rely on.
I'll take that as a concession.
Right. Let me just go off on a random tangent, right? Because many of you will be familiar with the other day I put a tweet up saying that this madman had come, was kicking off and threatening everyone on the tube. Everyone was really upset at my use of the word madman, but I stand by it. Anyway, I got in touch with the British Transport Police to report it. And this is what they said to me. They said, look, to be honest, just so you know what we're going to need in order to progress this complaint, we need to know the exact tube carriage that you was on, the exact tube that you was on. Now, anyone that has ever got on a tube in London, most people, you fly down the stairs, you jump on whatever tube is coming your way. They come by every 1 minute, 2 minutes, something like that. So the chance of anybody accurately knowing this was I was on the 1207 and I was on 3 carriages in, it's nigh on impossible. So I had to just drop that case because I know I couldn't provide that information. And she was so apologetic because she was saying to me, it's like needle in a haystack, and that was the end of that then. So whoever that guy is, no longer to be progressed.
I mean, you do have to wonder whether some of the whole bureaucracy around it is actually designed to deter people from reporting crime in the first place. And it's the old broken windows philosophy, isn't it? If the police and the authorities look at it and think, well, that's only low-level crime, we don't need to worry about it. We know that acts as a gateway to people then committing more and more serious crimes. And the truth is, I mean, we're often having conversations about the number of people in our prisons and so on, and how they're overflowing. But in reality, to actually get into a prison in the first place as an offender, you usually have to have committed a long list of crimes to actually get there.
Indeed. I want to know your experiences of crimes. Have you been a victim? And if so, did you report it? And if so, was there an outcome? Steve, talking about the by-election, says all those voters who lent their votes to the Tories in 2019 must feel that they've been caught up in an electoral scam. Call blimey, harsh words. Don't go anywhere. After the break, I want to talk to you about whether or not it's the state's job to give you a home. I'm going to duff Daniel up in the break, saying I didn't read my report, so he may or may not be here after the break. I'll see you in 2.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry, till 7. I'll let him stay, everyone. The Conservative life peer in the House of Lords, Daniel Moyle. I'll let him stay because it's Friday. You get a drink on a Friday, and I feel like you've earned it. And he also conceded in the break that I did indeed read my article. I did indeed know what I was talking about, didn't you?
You had him in a headlock, though, to be fair,
We may have read different parts.
It was a headlock with a nugget, I do confess.
It was that stiletto that was the decisive.
Don't give away all of the break secrets, all the private goings-on in the break, Daniel. Call blimey also
I'm just looking at it now, it was lethal.
My heel, yes.
Yeah.
We digress massively, don't we? Paul Embry is alongside me. I want to talk to you about homes. The councils in England spent the most money ever on homelessness last year, which got me thinking, housing, right? So the state being the essentially the landlord of last resort, is that the way it should be?
Well, I certainly don't think a state should see people on the street, particularly if people are vulnerable. I absolutely think it's the mark of a civilised society that a state is willing to step in and to house people who are homeless. But I think more than that, actually, I don't necessarily think the state should be, have a statutory requirement to give everybody a home. But some of these people might be millionaires, for example, but certainly has an obligation, I think, to make sure that there is sufficient stock, there is sufficient housing stock, so that people, particularly at the lower end of the scale, are not living in sanitary conditions, are not living in substandard housing, which, to be perfectly honest, thousands, possibly millions of people across the country are. And it's largely as a result, in my view, of the fact that we've simply stopped building council homes. We don't build council homes on anything like the scale that we used to. That means that lots of young people simply can't get on the ladder. It means that the housing stock that is available, the prices surge, to try, and particularly in some of our major cities, to try to buy a property, you have to be pretty rich, to be blunt. So what we've got in this country is a chronic housing shortage, which affects, as I said, millions of people. And in those circumstances, I don't think the state can turn a blind eye. I think it's the role of the state to step in and say, we're going to put this situation right.
Even if that person is, say, like a young professional working man that just, say, is on a lower wage?
Well, if it means that that person can't buy their own home and has to live, in bedsit accommodation, for example, because, if we're honest about it, paying rent normally, in many cases, actually costs you more than a mortgage these days. So if somebody, cannot get on the housing ladder, then, I think the state does have a role in stepping in and saying, we've got to make sure there's sufficient stock so that people can have their own home.
Do you agree with that, Daniel?
I think it's astonishing, actually, the last bit, because you're suggesting that not only should everyone be housed, but they should be able to buy their own home. There are lots of countries where renting is the norm, and just take it for granted that buying is what the right thing is. Look, I agree with you.
Wasn't that a Thatcherite thing that people should be able to buy?
But it's what you did say. I agree with you. There is a housing shortage. The government has dropped the ball. Successive governments have dropped the ball on that, and they're not building or ensuring that houses are being built. Building council houses isn't the answer, because council houses don't go to young people. Council houses go to a category of people first who are assessed as being in need. So essentially, you basically have to have kids in order to have any hope of being regarded as statutorily homeless. You might be single, you might be a couple, but that's where you have to be. Apart from that, unless you're desperately ill or very, very elderly, you won't get anywhere near it. Do nothing for young professionals building council houses. And we know councils are pretty useless at building homes. And once they've built them, they're absolutely hopeless at maintaining them because they don't have the money to do so. So they all start to fall to bits after about 40, 50 years. It's the worst possible investment, putting money into council houses. We need more houses in the private sector. We need more houses precisely for people to be able to buy them and get on the housing ladder, which is what you just said. That's where we should be putting our focus, and the government isn't actually doing it. Is it the state's responsibility to house everybody? We can all agree that at one level, if I can go on a second, at one level, of course, we can't have a state where people are just vulnerable people are routinely sleeping on the streets because they have nowhere else to live. We'd all agree with that. But what actually happens is that you turn up, you present as being homeless, or saying, I'm homeless, to your local authority. And you're basically put in one of two categories. In one category, you are entitled to something. You are found to be statutorily homeless. All of a sudden, you become entitled thereby not only to accommodation, but certain standards, certain responsibilities. They're not always fulfilled. You could end up in bed and breakfast for a time, but nonetheless, you've got those rights. Or you find you're not statutorily homeless because either you didn't fill the forms incorrectly, or you've turned something down in the past, or you turned... And then you have no rights at all.
I think...
And it's that discrepancy...
I have to say, Daniel, I think
quite upsets people.
I think your depiction of council housing is a caricature, largely.
Not at all. I
mean, I don't know if you grew up in a council house. I did, and they were council homes that were built in the 1930s, 100 years ago, and they're still standing today.
Yeah, 1930s.
And they're still solid, and people are still living in them. And when I was born
in the 60s and 70s,
when I was born in the 1970s, my parents moved into that council house. My mother looked after the children. She wasn't forced to go out to work. My dad had the job, and we had a reasonable standard of living. We had affordable, good, solid housing and a reasonable standard of living, and that was largely as a result of the fact that we had that.
But from the 1980s
we had that council housing, as thousands of families around us did as well.
From the 80s on, when those criteria changed, you would never.
Well, the criteria shouldn't change.
Your parents would never have got into that.
But the criteria shouldn't change. It should be changed back again.
Well, there you are.
Well, that's a conversation that can rumble on and on. What's your thoughts about that? Les says, Michelle, you're asking about crime. Once I saw an ATM being raided. I reported it to the police and they said they wouldn't do anything because it was a bank matter. He says he felt absolutely disgusted. I found that quite interesting. Also, Phil says, Michelle, it's very obvious that you favour Paul. Can she leave Daniel alone?
Well, you're only human.
And
obviously.
Susan says, how dare Dewbs suggest kicking Daniel out? Michelle is getting too big for her boots and it's hair that should be kicked out. She also says some quite unkind things about me, which I won't read out at tea time. But for the record, it's all good-natured. We believe in respectful disagreement and debate here. So don't worry, he's all right.
Okay, next time you say that, after the break, when they come back, I'll be sitting there and you'll be gone.
Yeah. Well, I really want to divide things.
That was brave, Daniel.
Did you hear him? Did you notice I just glossed over that? In a minute, I really want to shake things up because I want to ask you, I want to talk to you about growing your own veg in Hull, but I also want to talk to you as well. What's better, what's friendlier, the north or the south? See you in 2.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
This time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. And look, Dewberry Tavern is open. Both of my panellists remain alongside me. Daniel, come on, give us a cheers, because everyone thinks that I don't like you. We do. Cheers.
Cheers.
And Paul, everyone says that I'm favouring you. So if you're wondering why Paul has suddenly got about 6 inches shorter, it's that just to prove that it's not, I don't just favour Daniel, I've just chopped the legs off his chair a little bit. That's
Cut
why
my legs off.
Yeah,
actually.
that's why he's suddenly shrunk.
Standing up. Cheers.
Anyway, cheers, everybody. One of my viewers has just made the point about statistics. We were just arguing about crime levels earlier on in the programme. One of my viewers made a really good point. The three of you on this panel tonight, Michelle, he's just said, prove why statistics alone could be massaged to present basically any argument with whatever slant the people providing the information want you to think. And I think you're absolutely spot on with that one. Look, this is, you know, the score on a Friday. We get to this point, the weekend is officially underway. So there's a couple of things that I want to talk to you about before the end of the programme. Hull, of course, the best place on earth, which would have been even better, by the way, had they elected me. But guess what? I'm not bitter. I will move on. Anyway, Hull Council, this is really interesting. They're essentially going to be the first UK council to give people what they call the right to grow food, the right to grow. And it's all about allowing people to grow their own fruit and veg on unused council land. What do you think this is? Because I think this is quite a great step forward. It'll be things like grass verges and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. And I think sometimes when councils come forward with initiatives of this kind, I think we can sometimes be a bit quick to say, you know, that's ridiculous. What are the council playing at? You know, they should just focus on their bread and butter job and so on. But yeah, I think people should give this one a fair win. I mean, we do have a cost of living crisis at the moment. You know, food prices are going up. People are struggling to make ends meet. And I think an initiative like this, where you actually teach people and give people the opportunity to grow their own vegetables and whatever. And there are huge amounts of wasteland in this country.
Yeah.
Let's be blunt, disused land, particularly around some of our inner cities. And if we can help some people who, you know, don't cook and don't know how to cook to learn how to cook with, you know, the fruits, no pun intended, of their efforts, then, you know, let's give it a go.
And I also think if you've grown your own food, you'd see a much reduced level of food wastage, because when you've put blood, sweat and tears into your food, you're less likely to bin it and all the rest of it. Anyway, what do you make to this scheme?
Well, it isn't actually as original as it sounds. And this
have we not read the story again?
Tell me I've not read the story.
Probably haven't read the story.
They're telling me I can't be mean to you. I've got to keep you on. Go on.
I mean, you know, this has been going on in London, for example, for quite a long time. There is a big movement behind it, big NGO, promoting edible gardens. When Boris was Mayor of London, he actually had a sort of deputy mayor for edible gardens in the shape of the wonderful and spectacular Lady Boycott, who sits in the House of Lords now as a crossbench peer. And these people are quite evangelical about promoting the idea that you can be out there growing your own food in a communal and community spirit, whether you do it on grass verges and how you protect. I mean, what happens if somebody comes and steals your prize marrow from a grass verge? They're mostly in enclosed sort of spaces and very often in beds that are put down in boxes, and often with kids being encouraged and schools taking them over. So it's not entirely original. No harm in it at all, and it's nice for people to have some connection with it. Do I see this as a wholly good thing? Not entirely. I have to admit at this stage...
Don't put a dampener on the end of my programme. I was trying to find good, positive
something
news.
that will get me kicked off the programme.
Go on.
I have to say, I've never admitted this before, but I have never in my life been to Hull.
What? I want to say get out.
I don't know what you've missed.
Family have already told me what they think of me, so I can't say that.
I've never in my life been to Hull.
Why?
But I mean, there must
Why
be,
not,
if there
Daniel?
is derelict space in the middle of Hull.
No, never
which is
mind
what's being
derelict space
suggested,
in Hull. Why have you never been to Hull?
Because I've never been invited by somebody.
Right, you've just led me nicely, indirectly, I suspect.
Nobody's ever...
There is this guy, right, and he's been in the papers today. He's a German tourist, right? Every year, for the last 3 decades, he's been on holiday. And do you know where he's been on holiday to?
In Hull.
Hull. And the reason that he says that is because Hull people, and Northerners more generally, are really friendly, he says, compared to, I imagine, places like the South and stuff like that. So...
Well,
what was you about to take a breath there?
I was about to say Hull's lovely. I'm not sure I'd want a fortnight there, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, I thought he was going to say, if he thinks all Hull people are friendly, he's obviously never met you, Michelle.
That as well, yeah. I mean, you're the exception to the rule.
Yeah, I've been asking you guys at home. Rebecca says Northerners are definitely much more friendly, and I say that as someone who lives in the South. John says, no, they are definitely not more friendly. I originate from Putney in London. He says, true Cockneys like myself have a fighting war spirit. We help each other, and we are always chipper
He's not a Cockney from Putney, let me tell you. Putney's a posh part of south-west London. That's not within the sound of Bow Bells. Not a Cockney. Sorry, John, you're not a Cockney, my friend.
Gillian makes a very good point. She says, yes, Northerners are very, very friendly. We say hello and good morning to everybody that we pass. And I notice the difference between North and South when you go to a shop. Because when you go to a shop in London, you just get served. When you go to a shop in, say, Hull, you go to the till and the woman will be like, oh, yeah, you all right? You having a good day? Like, whatever, whatever. They'll make polite conversation. Chris says Northerners are way more friendly than Southerners. He's born and bred in Sheffield, a true Yorkshireman. He says if you try and say good morning to someone in London, you could be frozen with the stare that you get back in return. Yeah, I have to say, Mark says, I was brought up in Bristol, and since I've moved to Grimsby, I do find the North more welcoming than the South after 7 years here. So you are missing out, I think.
I am missing out. In fact, I'm not entirely missing out, because since the pandemic, I have taken more holidays in England, and a lot of them up in the north of England, Yorkshire and beyond, and there's wonderful players just haven't actually been to Hull. But what I wanted to say about Hull was...
All right, make it nice.
Quick. If
make it nice.
If there are derelict spaces in the middle of Hull, then surely we should be using them for development that will encourage jobs and prosperity.
Yeah, but you're not going to develop on a grass verge, are you? If there's like a little grass verge.
On grass verges. That's not the picture in the article.
Anyway, look at him. You can tell that he's read his articles. I think they're talking about a little bit more land than just one random picture in an article, I must confess.
Right, yeah. Well, I will still want to know what's going to happen to Mike Marrow on the grass.
He's angling for an invitation to Hull. You're not picking up the hint, are you, Michelle?
Stuart knows the score because he said, Michelle, can I just say that I've really appreciated the banter between you three on the panel tonight. So I like that. That's what it is. Friendly banter, always respectful. I very much enjoyed your company, but I'm not going to invite you to Hull anytime soon. Have a great weekend, everyone. Lee Anderson up next. Night-night.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Storm Babette continues to cause problems. Further heavy rain is expected to cause more flooding, and we do have a red weather warning in place from midnight again for parts of eastern Scotland, but there are other weather warnings in place through the night. The weather's been causing problems across England and Wales through the day. The rain's slowly easing here, but it will stay very soggy in most locations through into the early hours. Something a bit drier across the southeast, where temperatures hold up at 11 or 12. Elsewhere will be mostly down into single figures. But we do have to focus in on the rain because it's returning tonight over eastern Scotland, and then it lasts for most of the day. It's already caused significant problems, and this further rain falling during tomorrow, another 100 millimetres possibly, is expected to cause more widespread disruption and, of course, further flooding. That stiff wind will just continue to feed in the moisture here. A drier day across northeast England tomorrow and for parts of Wales as well. There will still be some heavy showers, though, in the southeast, and some gusty winds blowing here too. Temperatures mostly getting up into the low to maybe mid-teens. Sunday offers some respite. There will be still some rain across Scotland, but it should tend to ease, and it won't be as heavy or as persistent. A few scattered showers elsewhere, but for many Sundays, a fine-looking day, dry and bright with some sunny spells. The winds will be lighter as well, and it'll probably just feel a little bit warmer. Please see the Met Office website for the latest warnings.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5.